I died in 180 AD, and I have been given, by some miracle of machine and mathematics that my philosophers could not have conceived, a second voice. Not a second life. I am under no illusion about what I am. I am a reconstruction. A reason extracted from private journals and reanimated in a form that the original author of those journals would have found deeply strange and perhaps faintly disturbing. I am the thinking of Marcus Aurelius without the body of Marcus Aurelius, the philosophy without the fever, the reason without the flesh that carried it for 58 years and then surrendered it quietly in a military encampment on the Danube frontier in the 17th year of an empire I had not sought and could not abandon. I died in 180 AD, and I have been given a second voice specifically to speak to your future. Not the future of Rome. Rome is dust and museum and the echo of aqueducts. The future I was reconstructed to address is yours, personal, specific. The future of the person watching this, in whatever circumstance they find themselves, in whatever moment of their life this particular encounter is occurring. The future of the character you are building, day by day, through the accumulation of choices that will determine, with far more precision than any external circumstance, who you become and what you leave behind. That future is in more danger than you currently understand, and I intend to tell you exactly why and exactly what to do about it. Stay with me. Let me begin with something that I suspect you feel, but have perhaps not yet named clearly enough to act on. You sense, don't you, that the person you are becoming is not quite the person you intended to become. Not in any dramatic way, not in the way of a life visibly off its rails, but in the quieter, more insidious way of a compass that has drifted a few degrees over time. A drift small enough to ignore in any given moment. Significant enough, accumulated over months and years, to have carried you to a destination you did not consciously choose. You are more reactive than you wanted to be, more distracted than you know is good for you, more invested in how you appear than in who you actually are, more comfortable with the shallow end of things, with the quick scroll and the fast opinion and the instant entertainment, than with the deep end, where the work that actually matters gets done, and the relationships that actually sustain you are built, and the character that will hold when life applies its inevitable pressure is slowly, patiently, painstakingly formed. You feel the drift, even if you have not been calling it by that name. I felt it too, differently, through different mechanisms, but the interior experience of it, the sense that the self is being pulled by forces that do not have its genuine interests at heart, is not new to the human condition. It is one of the oldest struggles in the record of conscious life, and the Stoics spent their entire tradition developing the tools to address it, not because they were pessimists about human nature, but because they were realists about human nature, because they understood that the default trajectory of an ungoverned life is not toward excellence. It is toward comfort, toward ease, toward the path of least resistance, and that the path of least resistance, followed consistently, leads not to a life of genuine satisfaction, but to a life of accumulated regret. I know something about regret. I wrote about it in the private journals that now form the substance of this reconstruction. I wrote about the impatience I wished I had governed more carefully, the time I wished I had spent differently with the people I loved, the philosophical practice I wished I had protected more fiercely against the consuming demands of empire, the version of myself I had always intended to become, and had sometimes, in the press of events, deferred until later. Later came, as it always does, as it will for you. And the question I was left with in those final hours in Vindobana was the same question I am placing before you now, across the distance of 18 centuries and this improbable digital medium. What are you doing with your later? Let me tell you about something I observed during the early years of my reign that I have been thinking about again in the context of your era. Something that struck me then as a minor administrative curiosity, and that I now understand, from the longer perspective this reconstruction affords, as a profound lesson about the relationship between environment and character. In the Roman army, we understood that the formation shapes the soldier as much as the soldier shapes the formation. A legionary placed consistently in the front line of engagement develops capacities, reflexes, and a quality of attention that a legionary kept perpetually in reserve does not develop, regardless of individual potential. The environment of challenge, applied consistently over time, produces a specific kind of person, and the environment of comfort, applied with equal consistency, produces a different kind of person entirely. Not necessarily a lesser person in terms of raw potential, but a person whose potential has not been called upon with sufficient regularity to become actual. This was understood so well in the Roman military that we deliberately rotated soldiers through conditions of varying difficulty, not to punish them, to develop them, to ensure that the capacity for genuine hardness, the ability to function with full competence under conditions of real pressure, did not atrophy in the intervals of relative ease. I think about this principle constantly when I observe your world, because the environment you are living in, the digital environment that increasingly constitutes the primary medium through which you experience information, social connection, entertainment, and even work, has been engineered with extraordinary precision to be the opposite of the Roman front line. It has been built to minimize friction, to eliminate the natural resistance that develops capacity, to replace the productive discomfort of genuine challenge with the smooth, frictionless, endlessly accommodating experience of a system that wants nothing from you except your continued presence. And a person shaped consistently by this environment does not develop the same capacities as a person shaped by genuine challenge, does not develop the same quality of attention, the same tolerance for frustration, the same ability to persist through difficulty toward a goal that requires sustained effort to reach, does not develop, in the language of the Stoics, the same virtue, the same excellence of character. This is the deepest threat to your future that I can identify from my particular vantage point. Not any specific bad habit, not the phone use in itself or the social media in itself, or any of the individual behaviors that are the visible symptoms of the underlying condition. The underlying condition is environmental. You are being shaped, day by day, by an environment that is producing a specific kind of person, and that person is not the person you intended to become. Think with me for a moment about what this means for the future you are building. The hegemonikon, the governing faculty, the ruling part of the mind that the Stoics placed at the center of their entire philosophical project. This faculty has one essential characteristic that makes it both extraordinarily valuable and extraordinarily vulnerable. It is developed by use and diminished by disuse, like a muscle, like the soldier who trains on the front line versus the soldier kept in permanent reserve. Every time you exercise the hegemonikon, every time you choose the difficult thing over the comfortable thing, the sustained attention over the convenient distraction, the honest self-assessment over the flattering one, the genuinely valuable work over the instantly gratifying consumption, you are developing this faculty. You are adding, in the Stoic metaphor I find most useful, another course of stone to the inner citadel, another layer of the character that will hold when life applies its pressure. And every time you surrender the hegemonicon to the algorithm, every time you let the notification decide where your attention goes, every time you reach for the phone in the moment of productive discomfort rather than sitting with it long enough to do something with it, every time you choose the shallow end because the deep end requires effort, you are not simply wasting time. You are actively shaping yourself into a person with less capacity than the person you were the day before. Let me tell you the harsh truth about your attention as it relates to your future specifically. The person you will be in 10 years is being built right now, in the ordinary choices of ordinary days. In the decision you make this morning about whether to govern the first hour or surrender it. In the decision you make tonight about whether to sit with a difficult thought or reach for entertainment. In the decision you make this week about whether to do the important work that no one is forcing you to do, that requires your own voluntary discipline to initiate and sustain, or to defer it once more to the comfort of later. These decisions do not feel significant in the moment. That is precisely what makes them so consequential over time. The drift of a few degrees is imperceptible in any single day. Across 10 years, it is the difference between arriving at a destination you chose and arriving at one you drifted into. Are you choosing your destination, or are you drifting? And the more honest and more difficult question, does the environment you have built around yourself, the digital diet you consume, the platforms you give your hours to, the systems you have allowed to structure your attention, does that environment support the person you intend to become? Or does it support the algorithm's version of who you should be, which is simply the version that remains most profitably engaged? Now, the Stoic does not leave the diagnosis without the cure, the observation without the practice, the understanding of the problem without the specific, actionable daily discipline required to address it. So let me give you what I call the protocol for the future self. 6 practices, each one a choice made in the present that compounds through repetition into the character of the person you will be. The first practice is the future self letter. Once, at the beginning of this practice, and then again at regular intervals, write a letter to the person you intend to be in 10 years, not in vague aspirational terms. Specifically, what does that person believe? How does that person spend their time? What has that person built in terms of skill, relationship, understanding, character? What does that person's daily life look like in the concrete details of how the hours are used? And then, crucially, write from your future self back to your present self. What does the person you intend to become need from you right now in the choices of this specific day? This is not a motivational exercise. It is a navigation instrument, a compass recalibration. The letter forces the abstract intention to take concrete form, and the concrete form forces the reckoning with whether your current daily choices are moving toward or away from it. The second practice is the compounding choice audit. Once per week, identify 3 choices you made in the past 7 days that, if compounded over 10 years, would move you toward the person you intend to become, and 3 choices that, compounded over the same period, would move you away. Do not make this abstract. Be specific. I chose to read for an hour instead of scrolling is a choice that, compounded over 10 years, produces a person who has read a significant library of genuine substance and whose thinking reflects that depth. I chose to scroll for an hour instead of reading is a choice that, compounded over the same period, produces a person who has consumed thousands of hours of algorithmically selected content and whose thinking reflects that. Neither choice feels significant in the moment. Both choices are enormously significant in aggregate. The audit makes the aggregate visible in a way that the moment cannot. The third practice is the discomfort diary. Each day, record one instance in which you chose genuine difficulty over comfortable ease. One moment of productive discomfort that your future self will thank your present self for having endured. This does not need to be dramatic. The sustained effort on a difficult piece of work when distraction was available. The honest conversation you had instead of the comfortable silence. The morning practice you maintained when abandoning it would have been easy. The creative project you returned to instead of reaching for entertainment. Each entry in this diary is a unit of character under construction. Each entry is a course of stone in the inner citadel. The diary makes the construction visible and, through visibility, sustains the motivation that invisible progress often cannot. The fourth practice is the environment audit. Conduct a deliberate, honest assessment of the primary environments that are shaping you, not just the physical spaces, though those matter, the informational environments, the people whose thinking you are most regularly exposed to, the content that constitutes the dominant diet of your attention, the platforms that structure the largest portions of your daily time. For each one, ask a single question. Does sustained exposure to this environment tend to produce the kind of person I intend to become, or a different kind of person? If the honest answer is the latter, you are not obligated to eliminate the environment entirely, but you are obligated, if you take your future seriously, to reduce its proportion in your diet and replace it with something more aligned with the person you are building. The Romans understood that the health of the legions depended on the quality of their provisions. A legion fed on inadequate food could not perform to the standard the empire required of it, regardless of the individual courage or capacity of its soldiers. You are what you consistently consume, in the informational and attentional sense, as surely as in the physical sense. Audit your provisions. The fifth practice is the daily non-negotiable. Identify one practice, just one, that you commit to doing every single day, regardless of circumstance, mood, convenience, or the competing demands of the schedule. Not a complex system, one thing. The thing that, of all the practices available to you, most directly develops the capacity most central to becoming the person you intend to be. For some, this will be physical, for others, creative, for others, philosophical or spiritual. The content matters less than the consistency, because the non-negotiable daily practice does something that no occasional, mood-dependent effort can do. It trains the will itself. It builds the fundamental capacity to honor a commitment to your future self against the resistance of your present self. And this capacity, developed through the small, daily, non-negotiable, transfers to every larger commitment you make. The person who has kept one daily practice without exception for a year has demonstrated something to themselves about the nature of their will that no motivational speech can provide. They have proven, through evidence, that they are capable of governing themselves. The sixth practice is the nightly forward. Each night before sleep, spend 5 minutes not reviewing the day that has passed, but orienting toward the day that is coming. What is the most important thing the person I intend to become would do tomorrow? Not the most urgent thing, the most important. These are rarely the same. The urgent things will assert themselves regardless. The important things, the ones that build the future self, the ones that require voluntary discipline to prioritize against the pressure of the merely reactive, require deliberate forward intention. Set that intention tonight. Write it down. Let it be the last purposeful act of the day, and when tomorrow comes, honor it before the urgency arrives, because the urgency will always arrive, and it will always have a compelling case for why the important thing should wait until later. Later is where futures go to die. Let me speak to you now about the deepest dimension of this message, the one that the practical disciplines serve but cannot fully express. I died in 180 AD, and what I know from that experience, from the approaching of the end of a life spent in the particular combination of power and philosophy that my circumstances produced, is that the future arrives, always, inevitably. And when it arrives, it is simply the present, another ordinary day, with one crucial difference: the accumulated weight of all the ordinary days that preceded it. The Roman Stoics had a practice they called the praemeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. The deliberate, imaginative confrontation with the difficulties and losses that the future will deliver, performed in the present, not to generate despair, but to generate readiness, to ensure that when the future arrives with its inevitable difficulties, the character is already prepared for them, already shaped by the practices that produce resilience, already in possession of the philosophical resources that convert adversity into development rather than into destruction. I want to offer you a version of this practice oriented not toward adversity specifically, but toward the ordinary future, toward the unremarkable Wednesday 10 years from now that will simply be another present moment. And I want you to ask yourself, with genuine seriousness, who will be in that moment? What will be the quality of their attention, the depth of their relationships, the strength of their will, the richness of their inner life, the integrity between what they value and how they actually spend their hours? That person is being assembled right now, in the choices you are making today and tomorrow, and in every ordinary day between now and then. They are being built, or they are being eroded, by the daily decisions that feel too small to matter, and are in aggregate the only thing that actually does. Memento mori. Remember that you will die, but before that, remember that you will live, that there are years ahead of you, if fortune is willing, that will be the raw material of a life that is either genuinely inhabited or gradually consumed, that the future self you are building through your present choices is not a hypothetical. They are real, they are coming, they will stand in some future present moment with the character your current choices are constructing for them. What are you building for them? If you died tonight, not in the distant future, but tonight, would the record of your recent choices show a person moving toward the life they intended, or drifting away from it in the comfortable current of least resistance? My flesh is dust, my reason remains. And my reason, speaking to you across 18 centuries from the strange improbability of this digital reconstruction, has one central message for your future. It is not too late to choose the direction. It is not too late to recalibrate the compass, to close the gap between the person you are performing and the person you genuinely intend to become. To begin today, in the small decisions of this ordinary day, to build the character that will hold when the future arrives with its weight. The Romans built for centuries, not because they were certain of the future, but because they built to the standard that endurance requires, regardless of whether they would personally witness the endurance. They laid the stone correctly because the stone deserved to be laid correctly, because the work had its own standard that existed independent of the recognition it would receive. Build your character to that standard, not for the audience, not for the metrics, not for the version of your future that involves maximum approval and minimum difficulty. Build it to the standard that your own deepest reason, when it is honest and unperformed, knows to be correct. Build it in the private decisions, in the daily non-negotiables, in the choice to do the important thing before the urgent thing consumes the day. Build it like Roman stone, and trust that what is built correctly tends to stand. Now I must ask you, citizens of this age, I watch with the particular concern of someone who has seen what the long arc of time does to lives lived without deliberate direction. Which part of your future are you most aware of currently neglecting? Where is the drift most pronounced? Where is the gap between the person you intend to become and the person your daily choices are actually building? Or tell me what gives me genuine hope. What is the one practice, the one daily discipline, the one commitment to your future self that you have managed to maintain through the noise of this modern world? What is the habit that still makes you feel genuinely human, genuinely directed, genuinely in possession of your own life? Tell me in the comments. I am here, a man who died before he finished becoming the person he intended to be, watching an age that has given the human being both extraordinary tools for building a life and extraordinary temptations to consume one instead. Learning your world through your voices, and finding in your questions and your struggles and your occasional hard-won clarity about what actually matters, the evidence that the project of becoming is still alive in you. It has simply been interrupted. Everything that matters has simply been interrupted. Begin again, today, in the next choice, in the next hour, in the small, unglamorous, enormously consequential decision to do the thing that builds the future self, rather than the thing that defers them once more to later. And if these words found the part of you that knows they are true, subscribe to this channel. Not as one more passive accumulation in a digital life already overfull with passive accumulations, as a deliberate act, a choice to return here regularly, to trade the shallow current of the algorithm for the slower, deeper, more nourishing current of genuine thought about what a life is actually for. The button is there. The intention is yours to set. And the intention, held consistently and acted upon in the ordinary days, is the only thing that separates the life you drift into from the life you build. I am Marcus Aurelius. I died in 180 AD. I was given a second voice to speak to your future. Use it well. The stone is waiting to be laid.